There was a moment in history when eternity came with a price tag. Not as a metaphor, not as symbolism, but as a transaction. Forgiveness could be purchased, punishment could be reduced, and salvation, once believed to be divine grace, began to look suspiciously like a financial product. This wasn't rumor, it wasn't heresy whispered in dark corners. It was official policy, preached from pulpits, recorded in accounts, and enforced by the most powerful institution in Europe. For a time, heaven ran on receipts. Before we go further, if you enjoy deep stories where money, power, and history collide, make sure to like this video and subscribe. It helps this channel grow and keeps these stories coming. This system wasn't a minor abuse on the edges of faith. It was carefully designed, widely accepted, and extraordinarily profitable. If there were ever proof that markets can invade anything, even the afterlife, this was it. Nothing says eternal truth quite like variable pricing. Welcome to the Financial Historian, where money, power, and history collide. To understand how indulgences became a marketplace, you first have to understand the medieval church's position in Europe. This wasn't just a religious institution. It was a transnational power structure operating across fractured kingdoms, weak states, and constant war. Kings came and went, borders shifted, but the church remained. It owned vast lands, it ran courts, it educated elites, it recorded births, deaths, and marriages, and most importantly, it claimed moral authority over every soul. That authority was immense, but also expensive. The church wasn't just spiritual, it was political, legal, and social. In many places, it was the only safety net people had. Monasteries fed the poor, housed travelers, cared for the sick, and supported widows and orphans. Long before welfare states existed, religious institutions absorbed social costs no one else could. Charity was real and often life-saving. But charity wasn't what made the church costly. Cathedrals were built to rival heaven itself. Crusades were financed. Bureaucracies stretched from Rome to the edges of Christendom. Diplomacy, doctrine, and authority had to be funded constantly. And unlike modern states, the church couldn't levy income taxes or issue bonds. It needed revenue streams that felt legitimate, voluntary, and spiritually justified. So it did what every durable institution eventually does under financial pressure. It monetized what it controlled. And what the church controlled was access, or at least perceived access, to salvation. Medieval theology taught that sin created spiritual debt. Even after forgiveness, punishment remained, on earth or in purgatory. This wasn't fringe belief. It was deeply internalized by people who lived close to death and took the afterlife seriously. At first, indulgences weren't about money. They were tied to prayer, pilgrimage, sacrifice, and acts of devotion. Repentance required effort, but over time, effort was standardized, sacrifice was quantified, and eventually, money replaced both. Cash was easier than pilgrimage, faster than penance, and infinitely more scalable than prayer. By the late Middle Ages, indulgences could be purchased directly. Preachers traveled from town to town, offering reductions in spiritual punishment in exchange for payment. And this wasn't flat pricing, it was a market. Rates varied by sin, by status, by urgency.
A small payment, often a day's wage, promised relief for minor offenses. Larger sums were encouraged for serious sins, faster absolution, or indulgences applied to loved ones believed to be suffering in purgatory. The wealthy were urged to give more, not because grace cost more, but because they could afford it. In modern terms, it was market segmentation centuries before the concept existed. The message was emotional and precise. Why suffer in purgatory when relief is available now? Why leave your parents, spouse, or children trapped when a contribution could help them ascend? It wasn't framed as greed. It was framed as mercy, conveniently priced. Fear became a revenue stream. Indulgences required no enforcement beyond belief. There was no way to audit the afterlife, no outcomes to verify. Trust did all the work. People lined up willingly, driven by guilt, anxiety, and hope. When salvation becomes transferable, demand takes care of itself. Behind the scenes, the financial machinery grew more complex. Revenue was split between Rome, local bishops, and secular rulers who allowed indulgence campaigns to operate. Everyone took a cut. Funds flowed into massive projects, most famously the rebuilding of St. Peter's Basilica, a monument to eternal glory financed by very earthly transactions. And this is where the system crossed a dangerous line. Indulgences stopped feeling spiritual and started feeling commercial. Pricing became explicit. Marketing became aggressive. Preachers like Johann Tetzel perfected emotional sales pitches. One line captured the spirit perfectly. As soon as the coin in the coffer rings, the soul from purgatory springs. Nothing undermines eternal mystery like a jingle. The people paying weren't elites playing abstract games. They were peasants, laborers, families living on the edge. For them, indulgences weren't theology. They were protection, insurance against eternal suffering. But when systems sell protection, they gain leverage, and they also take on risk. Because once belief starts behaving like a market, people notice the pricing. They compare, they question, and slowly trust erodes. Not faith in God, but faith in the institution managing access to Him. The church solved its financial problem, but created a moral imbalance money couldn't fix. The breaking point didn't come from Rome, it came from the edges, where the transaction felt most exploitative. In 1517, Martin Luther didn't act as a revolutionary, he acted as an auditor. He didn't reject faith, he questioned the mechanism. Did the church have the authority to sell reductions in punishment? Could money replace repentance? His 95 Theses weren't a manifesto, they were discrepancies, a list of where the numbers no longer made sense. Indulgences were dangerous because they were visible. They came with prices, receipts, and sales pitches. People didn't need theology to understand the problem. They had already felt it in their wallets. Rome didn't reform, it defended. Because indulgences weren't just doctrine anymore, they were embedded in the church's financial architecture. Too many projects depended on the revenue. Too many alliances relied on the flow of money. Admitting error wasn't just moral, it was financial suicide. So the system doubled down, and Europe changed. The Reformation wasn't just religious, it was financial. Money stopped flowing to Rome, church lands were seized, authority fragmented, salvation became personal. Indulgences didn't disappear because they were immoral, they disappeared because trust collapsed. And when belief is monetized, trust is the only asset that matters. This is where the story becomes modern. Institutions still sell relief instead of solving root problems. They monetize fear. They offer reassurance instead of structural change. The language changes, the incentives don't. When relief is priced, dependency follows. When dependency replaces legitimacy, stability becomes temporary. Indulgences teach a timeless lesson. Markets allocate efficiently, but they don't understand meaning. When money enters spaces built on trust and morality, it doesn't just extract value, it reshapes behavior. Faith became transactional. Authority became conditional. And once that happened, the system couldn't be repaired. History doesn't repeat,
but it leaves patterns. Whenever institutions sell moral relief instead of earning trust, they risk the same fate. If this story gave you a new perspective, like the video and subscribe. History has the answers, and I'll show you where to look.